Hello everyone, and welcome to my A Hard Day's Night collection video. This is the third installment of my Beatles albums videos, so this is going to be all of my copies of this album. So I'll start with the monos. This is an original mono copy, and this sleeve was made by Gowden Lofthouse Limited. Now here's the label. Now, the thing I need to point out with the very first variations of this pressing is that the text is a lot wider and chunkier than normal, and that's most obvious on the PMC 1230 here. It's very wide, and it also has the recording first published and sold in the UK text and Powerphone Company Limited perimeter text. Here's side 2 as well. So it's large on that side as well. Now with this album I do have many duplicates, particularly of the monos, so quite a few of these are just going to be the same pressing, but I'll mention them anyway. This is another copy of that exact same variation with the wide text on the label, and this was actually my first mono copy of Hard Day's Night, my very first one, and that's also got the Gowden Lofthouse Limited sleeve on the back there. And here's the same label again with the wide text, although this label's in better condition than the previous copy that I've shown, as is the cover as well. So that's the same. Now this next copy, it is exactly the same as the two I've already shown, however this copy has an Ernest J. Day sleeve. Now the curious thing about the Ernest J. Day sleeves with this album is that they have a slightly different colour for the album cover. So I'll put a Gowden Lofthouse sleeve next to it so you can see the difference. Now you can see that the Ernest J. Day sleeve on the right is much lighter than the darker Gowden Lofthouse sleeve on the left, so that's quite a interesting feature about the two different sleeve manufacturers. And here's the back, Ernest J. Day on the flip back, and that label's the same as the other two. Okay, so here is the variation B of the first pressing. Now, this is also Gowden Lofthouse, by the way. Now, here's the label for the variation B. Now, as you can see, it no longer has the wide text. It's just the normal size now, so it's a lot smaller. It still has the recording first published and the sold in the UK text and Powerphone Company Limited, because it is still a first pressing, just not quite the earliest variation. Now I do also have a few different variations of this, variation, so I'll just point out the thing to look for on this one, and the difference that you have to look out for on this variation is that, and this is incredibly hard to see, that the R on the recording first published is just sort of below the E and the X, so that starts just where the E meets the X, about there. And here's the next variation of this copy, and here's the label. Now, as I pointed out on the previous label, there is a difference over here. Now, whereas the R in recording first published was below the E and the X before, it's now below the first X of the XEX there. So that is just an extremely minor label difference, but it's still a different one, I suppose. So it's just little variations like that sometimes. And here's another copy of that exact same thing, except this has a name sticker on the top, Mark Hills. Now here is yet another variation of that same label, and this one also has an Ernest J. Day sleeve, which you can see by the lighter colour of the blue. Now this difference is quite a bit more obvious, and that's the spacing between the song titles is much larger than before, so you get just much bigger gaps in between the lines. Now something I will point out before I move on is that all the labels so far on side 2 have all listed the songs vertically like that, so they've all come down, because that's going to be important in a second. Okay, now for the variation C of the first pressing. Now as you can see on the label here, all of the song titles on sides 1 and 2 actually have been totally reorganised. So you can see on side 1 the spacing of the song titles is horizontal rather than vertical. It just kind of takes up a lot more room on the label. It's easy to see on side 2 actually. So as on all previous releases, it was vertically arranged. Here it's horizontally arranged, so that's been completely redesigned. Now here is sort of like a hybrid variation of B and C. Now here is side 1 of this record, and the song titles are arranged horizontally just like the variation C, whereas side 2 is arranged vertically, so it's like variations A and B. Now I'll just show side 1 again. This is what it's like on the variation C. Now I've got the variation B that I showed before, just so I can show you once more what the variation B looked like. I should have known better. It just kind of cuts off halfway through and continues on to the next line on the variation B, whereas on the variation C it continues all the way to the end. So that's a bit of a hybrid there, I suppose. Right, so there's the complicated bit over. Now for just a straightforward press and run. So here's the second pressing, variation A. This is from 1966 until 1969. Okay, so this is variation A. Now unfortunately this copy does have a very large tear at the top, which is where some type of stick has been at some point, which is a shame, but oh well. So anyway, it now begins with the Gramophone Company Limited on the perimeter text, and recording first published has been replaced with P1964, and the sold in the UK text is still there. However, as you can see, the label is completely different, because it's got the Times New Roman font rather than the sans serif font. And there's side 2. And here is the variation B of the second pressing. Now it looks very similar to the early mono copies, except for the Gramophone Company Limited on the perimeter text, and of course there's no recording first published there. And this side 2, which has been rearranged once more. And here is the third pressing, which was available only in 1969, and this cover has a small mono in the corner. And of course the 69 pressings do not have the sold in the UK text across the top, but otherwise pretty much are identical to the previous variation that I've just shown. And this is just another copy of the 1969 pressing. However, this cover just has the regular mid-sized mono at the top, but the label is exactly the same. Now here is the 1981 mono pressing, and this does not have any flipbacks on the cover. and here's the label. No sold in the UK text. The perimeter print starts with all rights of the producer, and there is mono written in the corner there. And here is the 5th pressing mono from 1987 to 1991, and that has a large mono on the top of the cover. And this is the variation without the apple at the bottom of the sleeve. And there's the barcode. And here is the 2-box mono label for this pressing. Now the interesting thing is that there's actually a misprint here, and if you look over here it says YEX instead of XEX. Now YEX is stereo and XEX is mono, and this is mono, however it's got Y instead of X. And this is exactly the same, except this is the variation with the apple on the back of the sleeve. And this also carries that same misprint with the YEX on the label. And this version is the 2003 Holland pressing. Now interestingly, the blue on this one's much lighter than anything else that we've seen so far, so yeah, and of course the apple still. And here's the label with the dish effect as usual. And I do also have the mono reissue in the box set. So, okay, now for the stereos. So here's the first pressing stereo, and this is variation A. So, like the mono original, it has wide text, as you can see on the PCS, and of course this is stereo, so it's got the stereo written up. Parlophone Company Limited, Recording first published, sold in the UK text. There's the side 2. Now here's the variation B, and like the mono variation B, the text is not as wide as on the variation A. There's side 2 again. Nothing much has changed so far. Okay, now unfortunately I've been unable to get any of the stereo second pressings up to now, so we're going to have to move straight on to the third pressing variation C. Now this is actually quite a rare copy of the variation C. I'll show you why. Oh, and by the way, it's got the small stereo. Now the reason this copy is so rare is because there is a misspelling, and that's on track 2 here. It's got I should have know better instead of I should have known better, so it misses off the N on the end of the word. Now this person has the Gramophone Company Limited, and the Recording first published has been changed, and of course the titles have been arranged differently too. Now this is another copy of that exact same variation, except the misspelling has been corrected, so it says I should have known better now on track 2. Now here's the fourth pressing stereo, which is from 1969. Now of course the 69 pressings don't have sold in the UK, so that's the main difference. So it's the same as the mono one really, it's just obviously this is a stereo copy. And here is the fifth pressing, available from 1969 to 1970, and this one doesn't have any stereo designation in the corner. And here is the one box label. And here's the sixth pressing from 1971 until 1973. And this pressing doesn't have any flipbacks. And here's the 2-box label. Now this copy has the Gramophone Company Limited to begin the perimeter text. And now for the 7th pressing from 1976 to 1980. And this copy has EMI Records Limited to begin the perimeter text. This is the 8th pressing, available from October 1980 until April 1984. And this copy starts with all rights of the producer on the perimeter text, public performance, broadcasting, copying and hiring. Here is the 9th pressing, available from 1984 until 1987. And the difference with this one is a lot more obvious, and that's that everything's just much wider. However, there is another difference, and that is up here. The rim text is in a slightly different order, with copying, hiring, public performance and broadcasting. And finally, this is the 2012 stereo remaster of Hard Day's Night. However, this is also sealed, so obviously I can't show you the record inside. Alright, so that's my Hard Day's Night video. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope you'll all tune in next week, where I will be showing all my copies of Beatles for sale.